Welcome to Business Reporter's The Future of Work campaign. The world of work has changed significantly over the last few years. HR teams have had to adapt quickly just to keep pace, but many are failing. Legacy technology and methods are holding them back. So how do leaders empower their teams with the right technological tools to win, retain and manage talent, thereby maintaining a competitive edge? Well, that's what we're going to discuss with Geraldine McCarthy, Chief Revenue Officer from Personio, an all-in-one HR software solution. Geraldine, companies have been digitising processes for years. Where is HR on that journey?
Quite frankly, I would say HR is pretty far back on their journey. I think that's for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I would say that the workforce and the way people want to work has changed significantly over the last couple of years. And the investment into reflecting that new way of working just isn't there in a lot of businesses. And secondly, if I compare it to the investment that's happening in other parts of businesses and other teams, for example, the amount of investment into artificial intelligence and teams like customer experience, for example, the HR teams are very far removed from that level of innovation at the moment.
Why is that the case?
I think that's for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, HR doesn't have a seat at the boardroom table. One of the things I think that's important to remember is when you think about your employees or your workforce, for the vast majority of companies, that is the biggest expense that you have within the business. But it's not just the biggest expense, it's also the biggest asset that you have within your business. And so if you decide to invest in there, that's where you can truly realise value. But it's a bit like a chicken and egg because you can bring HR into the boardroom. If they don't have the data and the right level of insights and strategic intelligence, they can't really add value into there. And so really this situation is really cyclical and it needs to start somewhere, the investment into HR.
So what is the right way to digitise HR?
I think companies are on a range of different digitisation journeys right now. And from the companies I talk to, there's companies that are still on pen and paper right through to Excel or through to some solutions that are maybe fitting part of the employee life cycle. But where I see companies really getting full value of what they need to do and how they can really get competitive advantage is to go all in on digitisation of the HR journey. And by that, I mean starting with what do you need at a very basic level to be compliant and to be automated. And then from there, how can you really start to streamline workflows? Thinking about what you need right now, but ensuring that you have something that's going to serve you into the future.
So tell me more about Personio. What's your solution? What sets you apart?
Personio is an all-in-one solution that helps companies to upgrade their people operations for now and the future. It sits within a core HR solution, and then on top of that sits multiple options that you can decide what's right for your business, whether that's focusing on recruiting or developing your team right through to paying your team at the end of each month.
Can you give me an example of a client that's really benefited from using your solution?
Yeah, maybe I can give you a recent example of a company that's recently started to use Personio. And one of the great advantages that they had was to consolidate over 100 disparate and unique data sources into one source of truth. What that meant was that they were really able to understand what was happening within their business, and they had that data at the tips of their fingers whenever they needed it. And so that meant for them that they were able to make very fast and accurate decisions that were right for their business. So whether that is about understanding, do you have enough diversity within your workforce? Or within that diversity, do you have the right type of pay? You know, gender pay gap is a big discussion topic at the moment. And really to understand that is a huge competitive advantage, and this company did it really well.
What would you say to a company listening that says, yep, that all sounds great, but is this just going to be another tool that we have to invest in that eventually falls by the wayside?
Yeah, I think that is a great question to ask, and I think particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge amount of investment into the IT landscape within most companies. And most companies have a much more sophisticated tech stack than they've ever had before. One of the advantages of Personio is how often it is used. Of our customers that are using it, the vast majority of them are using it on at least a daily basis, sometimes more than once within a day. And so what you can know is when you're using a solution like Personio that you're truly going to get value and there's going to be high utilisation of that product.
What are your 3 key takeaways from our chat?
I would say, first of all, that the talent environment has changed significantly over the last couple of years in a significant way. That is really exciting and there's a huge opportunity there to capture, but to do that it has to be done with the right tools, the right systems and the right processes. Second of all, I would encourage businesses to think about how they digitise their workforce and their workflows to really get value from what they're doing within that process and to allow it to become a source of competitive advantage rather than something that's holding them back. And the third, I would, really talk to companies and advise them to think about what they need for now, but also for the future to make sure that they're future-proofed as they grow.
This was Geraldine McCarthy from Personio.